Now we're live.
Hello, everyone. So let's see if there's any public comment first.
I did not get any comments.
No public comment.
Okay. Um, then let's go through agenda by agenda item. Yeah, I think you have any specific questions from your side?
Well, I have some questions, but I would prefer we just go agenda by agenda.
Okay,
Right? Shall we do that?
sure.
Uh, let's see.
And I guess we should tell the public that this is the meeting of the board budget subcommittee meeting.
Oh, absolutely. That's right, Marcus. Today is February 22. Is the subcommittee meeting. Welcome. Actually, we forgot to ask a superintendent like whether he has comment.
Thank you very much, Trustee Zhang. No, I don't have comments. We have not received any public comments. And I am here to help answer any questions that our trustees may have, and as is the rest of our staff. So we can move right through the agenda at your pleasure.
All right, thank you. So my first question is item 10.2. And it's about this special assessment for 3 assessment. My question is, do we know where are the students? Is that I want to just understand whether they are on the elementary or high school, and whether we see an increased demand that our staff could not accommodate, or this is just a one-time thing. I know we just increased one psychology. It's like at the beginning when I took position.
So it's a great question, Trustee Zhang. We don't have our instructional services staff normally on this call, in part because it's mostly fiscal, but I can help try and address this question. I don't have the information in front of me in terms of what grade level the students are in, but when we have an agenda item where we're doing educationally related mental health services assessments, it can sometimes be where we have a need that exceeds the amount of FTE that our school psychologists can currently handle, and that does happen on occasion. Part of the reason for that is, as you may know, when we sign an assessment plan for a student, we have a specific number of days by which we have to conduct all of that testing to be in compliance with the laws for special education. And there are also circumstances where sometimes we utilize outside resources based on the nature of an assessment. And I would have to defer to Assistant Superintendent Salinas or to our Director English of Director of Special Education to give us more information on that. I can certainly prepare that information for the board.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I mean something along the line like a session. How long it takes usually to finish it. Maybe the public is also want to know because it costs total 15,000, and so how much lengthy work it requires.
Yeah, it generally takes about 3 hours, sometimes 4, to conduct the actual assessment. And then there's the scoring of the assessment and the writing of the comprehensive, what we call psychoeducational evaluation report. And that's all part of the special education process. And usually that assessment also needs to be combined with an academic aspect of an assessment as well. So usually when we contract out for services, this would be about the number that we'd expect when you break it down per assessment.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. So let's see. We forgot to ask the student count. Does he have student count? Do you have any questions?
Yeah, but they're a little later in the agenda. Or actually for this one real quick, could you provide like more information about the budget source mental health is that, or like maybe like how much funds are in that budget source like every year, and just like in general the space that we have in that fund?
Yeah, when we look at an education for special education eligibility or an assessment related to special education services, those funds, even though they might be related to mental health, are categorical special education funds. I don't have the amount of what's in that account right now in front of me. And I don't know if Rais or Mr. Battle or Robbie might have that information.
No, I don't have that information handy either.
Okay, thank you.
So what else? I got those all marked, including oh, I have a question on 11.5, which is adopt resolution and authorize staff to use a new pre-qualification process at Hopkins Middle School. So my specific question here is, in order to align the district pre-qualification process with the requirements established by AB 1565, it must meet the following criteria. And number 4, include a listing of approved bidder to be posted on the school website. Do we post it on the website? Have we done
Yes,
that?
actually, yes, we actually do. When we have formal solicitations, we actually do post the listing of all the people who actually submitted bids or qualifications. And it's basically just a notification of public information.
Oh, I mean, Kelly, which category? I mean, which button or category shall we look in? Can I find?
So you would either look in the purchasing department or you could find it in facilities. And
Oh.
usually if you go to the website, and I apologize because I'm not directly in front of my computer right now, but you can go to the website, go under business services, go to procurement or doing business with FUSD. And then there's a bunch of sublinks that you can then follow to take you to current bids or current RFPs or things like that. And then you can click on whichever one you're looking for, and then it directs you to the information.
Okay, thanks for that. In general question, because I think we are going to start this Hawking project, and usually, do we have our own general contract, or we kind of using our contract as a base, and then let the general contract to kind of add their own clause, or we use their general contract?
So I want to make sure I understand your question. So are you asking for the actual contract instrument that we use?
Yeah.
Or,
Yes.
oh, okay, we actually have a document that we use that the contractor usually agrees to also adopt and utilize. So we already have our standard agreements that are drafted and in place and part of the bid documents when contractors actually bid on work. So they understand whatever terms or requirements we have ahead of time. And by the fact that they go ahead and submit their bid, they agree to those terms that we've outlined in our general agreement. And usually when we negotiate with them, if there's any particulars that they have, issue with, we can either talk about it or sometimes I refer to legal counsel and they will advise us one way or the other if there's changes that need to be made based on whatever the contractor is asking for.
The reason actually I asked about this is, I see we have in the past we have some delays on project of completion, and I want to see the clause on this what's called project completion clause, and who is responsible for that?
So
Because
I want to
yes.
make sure I understand your question.
Mhm.
So in the contract, you want to see where the clause is specifically about project delays?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have that handy, but I'd be more than happy to send you our our contract that has a statement in there. And usually there's multiple steps that you have to go through in the contract to actually have a delay claim even sort of accepted. So the process that the contractor, it's stated in the contract, they have to give the district notification
Mhm.
of any delays within 24 hours of their anticipated delay.
Mhm.
Once the delay either occurs or is anticipated, we then have to evaluate whether that delay is valid or invalid. And then they also outline what the terms are that are considered acceptable things for a delay to occur. Usually acts of God,
Mhm.
inclement weather that delays a particular task, if
Mhm.
there is, earthquakes, fire, things like that. And then
COVID.
also if there's an actual delay from a source outside of the contractor's control. So if they ordered, say, a big part and they were scheduled to have it installed on a particular day, but the manufacturer was delayed by, say, 2 weeks because of a winter storm that they couldn't get it across the country in time. Those are the kinds of things that they have to notify us and ask us for approval for before it's actually given to them. So, and there's usually 7 days to 10 days has to be, impacted in the schedule. We evaluate it, and then we actually meet with the contractor to go over the entire schedule to see if it's actually valid or not. And so that's a process that every single time something happens, we actually go through that with them, and they tally up the number of days
Mhm.
at the end of we either agree on every quarter or
Mhm.
annually to say this is the amount of time that you're entitled to a delay based on these activities that occurred.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for the explanation. I mean, it
Mhm.
makes sense. And also, I think that the timeline is really good. But my point is that, how do we, uh, how do we control this so that we can really try to finish the project in time and within the budget? The point is, I look at this. I mean, I know that last year we had COVID, and now, I mean, following this question, we have this thing is which project? We are looking at
Trustee Zhang, you're talking about item 15.4? It was
15
the Horner Middle School McCarthy Builders. Is that the one that
Yes,
you're
yes,
referring to?
yes, yes. That's what $950,000.
Yes, yes. So Kelly, you want
My
to,
point is, how do we control that so that this won't happen? Or I try to understand.
So so I want to make sure that I've answered your question on 11.5 with the pre-qualification process.
Yes.
So that is just a process that we're asking approval for you all to allow us to do, which will then also help with 11.4, where we pre-qualify the contractors. We actually look at what their experience is and their level of qualification and their bonding capacity. And so once that's determined, then all the contractors who don't meet those criterias are not allowed to then bid on the work. So now in McCarthy's case, McCarthy's case on 11.4, that change order that we are going to be looking at on Wednesday is a combination of all of the changes that occurred over the course of the project. And understand this project was under construction for almost 3 years. So it's not something that happened quickly. And so over the course of the project, there were things that happened that either caused delays or there was additional work that was required, either that we had asked for or that was required because a condition happened on site that required additional work to occur, or Department of the State Architect required us to make changes in our structure to comply with whatever regulations they have dictated to us. So when you take all of those sort of over time,
Mhm.
we don't always approve them right away because sometimes the changes, you don't really know what the full impact is going to be until, say, a series of tasks are completed. So we, in this instance, a lot of the changes that were identified in that change order were items that were cumulative over time. And rather than approve it, say, when it's happening, we chose to take a position of, hey, the contractor says, oh, I want to go ahead and put this claim in for a delay. And our position was, well, you still have to deliver the project before you come back and ask me for delay monies, because we're still in the active process of completing the project. So that's why when McCarthy submitted the initial $2.6 million in potential costs for delay, we said, no, we're not accepting this. You still have to complete the work that you are contracted for, and you have to monitor, we have to monitor and track those actual activities that you're saying cause delay to ensure that, one, it's completed within the same budget that we've already agreed to. But if there are additional costs, you can then backtrack and document that for us to show, hey, we were delayed on this day, which then impacted us in this way. So we've kind of done a forensic review of that particular contract, and we were able to negotiate with McCarthy from the $2.6 million down to the 925,000. And so the 925,000, after we had reviewed it, those costs were actually substantiated based on the information that we had of the actual work that occurred and the actual time that was expended. So that's how we ended up with those costs and that sort of final negotiated number with them.
Yeah, so actually, I mean, if you look at the document associated with this, right, it feels like that there was a negative variance of 925K on the project contingency, and that's the exact same amount that this delay related cost that the builder is trying to charge to us. So it seems almost too convenient. Is that?
Well, I think that maybe, and I'll have to ask staff because I did not prepare the summary document for the expenses, but the contingency was sufficient for the items that were associated with the in-scope work. So what you all are seeing of the $925,000 is a culmination of all the work that fell outside of what their contract agreement stated they would perform for us. And so when we put it in the variance, because it was a negotiated sum, that 925,000 shows as the variance versus, I didn't want to give you guys a 9-page spreadsheet of, the 200 and some odd items that we kind of went through with them to whittle the number down. So that's why you have that. So I apologize if that's confusing.
No, it seems like a convenient number that way. So, but you're saying that with your explanation already suggests that there was a big list coming from the builder, and you've whittled it down to something that then added up to the 925K.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Yes, but that's a great, negotiation. But it also, shows that, I mean, the contract would throw any numbers there, and then really it's up to us to do a very good job in keep track and leave approval evidence, and then we can go back to say wait a minute, that's not right.
Absolutely correct.
Right, but then it's going to be a very lengthy process, right? For your team to go back to look at all this.
Well, but that is part of what our task is as managers of the project. So the banner team has many different people who are part of the overall process. And as I said, it's being monitored on a daily basis as to what activities occur and what is considered a valid expense and what is not considered a valid expense. So on a daily basis, I have conversations with our project managers and our construction managers who are on the site to say, hey, you know, the contractor submitted X amount of expense for this one item. We don't think it's a valid expense, so we're going to reject it. And so we have those kinds of conversations on a daily basis that, you know, are constant flow back and forth, that are just regular sort of activities that occur on a daily basis for these projects. And I only get involved when it actually is a cost expenditure for us that we have to then evaluate and say, you know, is it valid? Is it invalid? And does the district want to go ahead and make XYZ changes? So, but that's the process that we go on all of the projects all the time.
And I just want to say, trustees, I mean, this is not uncommon for many school districts with active construction projects. I don't want you to think that this is, you know, I mean, I would say that the staff are following good practices for the most part, but you are going to have things like this, and a lot of times the change orders are due to weather. I mean, that's the big one, you know, because that's something you can't forecast. They try to build that into the schedule, but sometimes if we get it, like this year, we've been pretty good with the rain, but if there were extended days of rain, then and they weren't able to continue construction, then they would try to negotiate with the district because of the delay, how that's going to be mitigated financially. So we would negotiate with them and come up with a best option. But this is very common in construction projects with school districts.
And the other thing I wanted to add to that, Marcus, is that in their contract, excuse me, we specify a particular cost per day that we will allow them to be allotted in the event they do have a delay. So they can't just come back and say, okay, it cost me $10,000 today. We have language in our contract that states delay claims due to certain activities, you're only entitled to like $1,000 a day delay, or, you know, $500 in damages for a subcontractor that fails to perform. So we are very clear in specifying and quantifying those particular activities. And so that would reassure you to know that those costs just don't flagrantly, you know, run out of control.
And so one more question there is for when we are writing contracts, there's some of this risk has to be borne by the contractor as well. So for delays,
Absolutely.
is all the risk borne by the school district?
No, all the risk is not borne by the school district, but in instances where it is our fault, we quantify what those expenses will be.
Sure.
Yeah,
But
and for this particular item, a lot of this was some of the district's responsibility. I would say, from my understanding, 75% of it was the district that requested the delay. Would you say that's about true, Kelly, or you think?
Yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and really, it had to do with timing, because when they finished the project, the district made a decision to not relocate kids right in the middle of a semester. So they actually delayed it to a more convenient time. And then when they delayed it, the pandemic started, and they were able to continue to work, but it just created a lot of issues with the timing of the project, and then with the pandemic and the delays. This is one that I was very familiar with, but most of it was the district requesting the delay.
okay,
See.
seems like a fair amount of due diligence here, and then Trustee Sang, if you're okay, then we can move to the next item.
Yeah, we can.
And student member Khan, you said you had some question on some topic here, right?
Yeah, I think I had a question on 15.3, just the kind of more background on like the reason for the budget authorization.
I'm sorry, I don't have
Kelly,
the agenda in front of me. Can you tell
Kelly,
me which item
15
that is?
Kelly,
Yes.
15. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. It's the budget increase on the Washington Theater Improvements Project.
Oh, okay. Please tell me your question again.
Yeah, so there's a additional budget authorization of $500,000. So just kind of more background on the reason for that increase.
Okay, sure, no problem. So the Washington Theater, we initially had estimated that project at $3.9 million. And we have a 10% contingency built in the budget to address outstanding items or changes that occur in the field. In this particular project, DSA has been extremely rigid with us in terms of the requirements for modification of the theater. So when we initially talked to DSA, they said, well, you guys will be grandfathered in under the old regulations for structural and seismic modifications for a building of that size and nature. And so we said, okay, great. We're going to go ahead and design this building according to the standards that we're going to be grandfathered into. Knowing that the cycle of code changes occurred in January of this year, they became, they became in effect. The codes were changed in 2019, but they didn't come into effect until January of 2021. So DSA, the person who we were originally working with, who was reviewing our particular project for structural, evaluation, they actually retired just prior to the pandemic beginning, very abruptly, and not that anyone was prepared or knew that that was going to happen. The new reviewer, even though they had documentation and notes from the previous person as to what we were going to be entitled to, they chose not to abide by or adhere to what the previous person had agreed to. And they then said, no, Fremont Unified, you guys have to adhere to these new standards. And if you don't adhere to the standards, we're not going to give you approval to actually build this theater. And what they were requiring of us is that because we were modifying more than 10% of the exterior structural supports for that building, we had to now abide by the new 2021 standards. So in doing so, it required us to increase the ability of the building to have more structural steel. They wanted additional bracing, and they wanted the foundation to be anchored in 5 more additional locations than what currently was already existing. The other thing they required us to do was to take down all of the structural supports that the parents had built for the seating that was in that theater, because there was no actual permit for it. So they couldn't justify or quantify what the structural calculations were for them. So we had to basically tear everything out and rebuild everything new. Now, initially, we were only going to do a partial modification because our structural engineer did a structural test to say, hey, these are sufficient. The connections as I visually observed them should work, and the calculations that I've estimated should be sufficient. Because this new reviewer at DSA was not abiding by the old conversation, they said, no, you guys have to do all new calculations. I want to have the new bracing, and you have to do new supports. So in doing that, that escalated the cost of what we originally had anticipated for the project. And unfortunately, the contingency that we had set aside for an emergency, that was insufficient to actually meet the needs of us to complete the project. So now we're coming back to the board to ask for this adjustment, because we're now being mandated by this, Department of the State Architect to make these modifications. And there really isn't anything we can do other than do them, or the other alternative is that the theater program has to be moved to another location and other accommodations met, because they will not verify and approve us to actually have the theater in the same location without these modifications being made. So that's why we're asking for the $500,000.
Now, pardon my ignorance, but DSA, is this a government body or is this a private?
So DSA is the division of the state architect. And
Correct.
if they are our governing arm for any construction for public schools in California. So they're like our inspector. If you were to do an inspection or do construction on your house, you have to have the city inspector come and they'll verify and say, hey, this meets the requirements. DSA is our regulatory arm that does that for us as a school district in the state of California.
Okay, so that so with the mid-cycle change of reviewers, I mean, when such a cost increase happens, is there kind of an escalation mechanism there to try to avoid this? I mean, why is it that, I mean, when person-to-person dependency, I mean, we can't be at the whims of individuals, right?
Well, unfortunately, I absolutely agree with you, trustee, but we are at the whim of DSA and they already are shorthanded in terms of people that do the reviewing. So we actually had a person who was based in Northern California, but our reviewer, because that person retired and they are shorthanded, our reviewer actually was someone in Southern California out of their San Diego office. So it just gives you sort of perspective that it's not isolated just to our region, but they're actually reviewing projects statewide as they come into their queue. So I absolutely agree with you. But and the other thing that is important to understand, this is a very short project. So in terms of having added escalation or additional contingencies, we were very confident that we were not going to, we didn't anticipate having any of them because it was such a short schedule. Because that project currently is under construction and we're due to have it completed by August of this year. So when you look at escalation and adding escalation into a project, you really look at projects on a long-term basis that are more than 12 months when you add escalation. So that's why we didn't necessarily add additional monies for that.
Not escalation. The way what I meant there was that you find a supervisor of this person to see if there's a way, because there are two things you said here that concern me. One is that the policy enforcement change between the previous inspector and the current one, right? So that for the continuity, I mean, it's not our fault that one person retired and second person took up. So that
Sure.
should, that if that costs us $500,000, that's just $500,000 that we didn't have to spend on it to begin with. And then the second thing is that if you are having to tear the insides and then go build it back again, it's just wasteful spending, right? So, um, so I mean, while this is $500,000 in the bigger scheme of things, we what is a typical process if you don't agree with with the inspector or the reviewer?
So the process that we actually went through is that when that change occurred, I had a conference call with our regional DSA representative, which is like an area manager, and the San Diego area manager, and they actually reviewed the notes. And the person who was our new reviewer was actually on the call as well. And they all, after the review of the documents that we had submitted, they actually all concurred that yes, we needed to abide by the new standards because one, the age of the building was more than 20 years old. And because we couldn't verify when the structural modifications occurred, when the additional seating and additional lighting structures were installed, for the fact of them being solely interested in safety, we call it fire life safety standards, they were erring on the side of being conservative rather than, oh, okay, we'll take your word for it. So they felt that it was a necessary requirement because two things happened. So there's been 2 code changes since that building was built. And so not knowing if any of the modifications were made according to the new standards, they did not want to have the risk associated with anything failing in that structure if it was not built according to what the standard stated it needed to be. So after we had that conversation, and also when I met with the Vanner team to really review in detail what the scope of work was, we all kind of agreed that, well, because we can't verify the work, we really do have to go ahead and do these modifications that we're requiring of us. And in order also to maintain the continuity of the programming, we felt that it was necessary to go ahead and complete the project as it has been requested, because it does have such a great impact on the community and the students at that school.
Okay. I mean, makes sense. Now this, where this will be from the Measure E fund?
This will come from the Measure E program contingency budget line item.
Okay.
And there are sufficient funds currently there to accommodate this request.
Okay, Zion, any more questions on this?
Yeah, but I just don't like the procedure. You know, one employee made a decision. I mean, she should have a supervisor to back up her decision. Anyway,
Yeah, well, that person retired and went away. So
right. But then she should have a boss, right? I mean, manager, she's not going on whatever, you know, leave of
yeah,
absence.
see, given that it's a safety related enforcement.
Yeah, but it's fine. I know, because maybe they would say they made a mistake, right? We going back and we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. So, anything else? Oh, I have a question on this 15.2, future return to in-person instruction. Those dollar amounts, $1.19 million. And that is with the CARE budget. And so we have allocated what, 5.9 million right now we have? Is that right? Is this 1.19 is going to be taken out of this 5.9?
You're referring to the designation that's a set
Yeah,
aside right now?
designation, right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that'll come from our designation. Yes.
Okay, that's good. So then we take another 2 million out of a designation and put it into our budget, right? Remember,
Right.
we take 2 million
Right.
out of this
That's correct.
designation,
Yes.
right? So now we only have like what, $2 million left in CARE to spend. Oh, 5.9, no, let's say 6 million. Could not do my math. 6 million. And then we take 2 million out of that, and this is 1.19. So we still have like 3 million, right?
And the 2 million, I mean, that was part of a recommended budget adjustment to utilize that 2 million. That's for next fiscal year. So we haven't moved that money yet. It wouldn't come until the next fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
And we would probably only move the money if we need to. So let's say we finish the year and we finish better than we had planned,
Mm-hmm.
then we may not need to make that adjustment. But that is part of the budget action that we asked the board to give us the authority to do that if we need to.
And I think
Okay.
the other important note is it's not that that money is necessarily going away. It's just moving out of the designation to the bottom line reserves. And so it's still our money, but it's moving within the budget. And we do anticipate that we will have additional funding that's coming forward from the state and federal government.
Okay. And but then we have a lot of money left, right? To use for CARE. I mean, anything
I
else?
wouldn't describe it as a lot of money, but we have sufficient money to backfill any unforeseen things that may come up. But we've already invested quite a bit into computers and to Chromebooks, hotspots, PPE. Now we're talking about HVA, air systems for the rooms. I mean, so we've invested a lot of money
Mhm.
already. So and so I think most of the large things we've covered. So I think we're in pretty good shape.
So we're in very good shape, right? For the school to at least mechanically to open safely.
Yes.
Okay. But also we must spend those money in CARE Act by like what, June or something? I forgot. Last time raised informed that we must spend it by certain time.
So
Am
our
I?
plan is to spend down all that money by June 30th
But this year?
of this year. Yes.
Oh, okay. That's a good well, that's a good question to have. What do you think?
Well, the expenditure of the money can also be used to purchase things that might be consumable. If we need more PPE, for example, if we need more supplies, then we can allocate that purchase within a certain time, but still use those things in a later year as well. So
I
in
see, I see. For the later years, yes. Okay,
yes,
good.
and we continue to hope to get more flexibility from the federal government on that, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, flexibility is good. Why they would force at June? Okay, that's good. Thank you for that clarification. I guess that's all my question, I think.
We should, so on 15.6, um, so there's another $200,000 increase.
Kelly,
On
15.6.
15.6,
15.6 is the Lila Bringhurst project.
Yeah, he's asking about the 200,000.
Okay, so this $200,000 that we are approving is just a formal contract modification for this particular vendor. These services have already been rendered and completed for the completion of the Lila Bringhurst project. These expenses are also expenses that were part of our final negotiation with the developer group that Fremont Unified is required to pay. So this is because of the dollar amount, we were required to come back to the board as a formal action for you all to approve and modify this particular contract so that we can actually pay the additional funds that were negotiated by our legal counsel with the developer group to close this project out. And at the time that we received title transfer, this particular documentation was still being reviewed by the developer group and legal counsel. But the dollar value associated with the work to complete has not changed from that time. So this is still part of our closeout for the Lila Bringhurst project.
Okay, so for the closeout and the negotiations on the damages and all that we were looking at, what I should say, at the time when we did our previous approval
Yes.
for the settlement. So this is the amount.
This is actually a cost that was embedded inside of that settlement.
Okay, sounds good.
But because the contract, the dollar value in terms of us modifying it, we're required to take it to the board for formal action of approval in order for us to be able to pay it.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. Okay, that was that. Now, one question on item 15.8. So this is the security selection of Orion Security. So this has been on the agenda a few times, and we've kept not late night. We kept pushing it out, right? So no change here.
There's
Now-
no changes on there. It's the same item that, like you said, been continuing to be pushed. But hopefully we can get it finished this time.
Now, one question is, we've had so much of vandalism that happened recently. So do we have some other security company looking at it or no?
Yeah, we have a different security company right now, and that's the one that this contract will replace. So we are planning to have a higher level of security in the district, and we'll have for in the evenings and weekends we'll have coverage. We'll have security patrol in the northern part of our district, and we'll have another patrol in the southern part of our district, so they can cover more space with 2 officers. So we're going to get a higher level of response and higher level of technology, and we're very excited about it.
Okay. Now, well, this is maybe not really part of this meeting, where we should look at also having some kind of passive or video surveillance type setup, so that uh, we can be monitoring things much better, right?
Yeah, we are slowly trying to move further in that area, but that in previous years, I was told that there was some pushback uh, by previous administrations, but we are trying to move a little further in that direction, at a slow pace, um, and especially at the sites where we're having frequent vandalism issues. And
Okay. Um, Now, this is what, $252,000 per year, right? So
yes,
in terms of security, are we paying anybody else any more money, or is this the total of all the security that we will be
yeah,
paying
this would be for all the security in the district. This would be everything. There's
everything?
no other. There would be no other. Right.
Okay. Okay. Um, Now, if there were cameras that are installed, will this amount be lesser, because then they have to patrol less often?
No,
No.
no, this wouldn't be lesser because you still have to have folks to monitor those cameras, and they still have to respond to calls as the alarms go off. So they are like our first responders. They would be the first to respond to, because we have to substantiate that somebody's actually in the building before the police actually would come out. So they would be the first ones there.
Okay. Now, Superintendent Kamek, what's your experience with video surveillance at other districts, and how does that help, or how much does that help?
Well, it hasn't always, it's hard to say how much it's helped or hurt, because sometimes it's hard to know how much of the crime you prevent.
Yeah.
And that's a tough statistic to track. But where it has helped us is when we have seen acts of vandalism or theft, and we've had a camera system there, we've been much more successful at identifying the perpetrators
Mhm.
and working with the police to either find the property or find the individuals who are responsible for the negative behavior. So that's where it really comes into play. I think, as Mr. Battle was describing, the camera systems can be helpful in solving the problem after it happens. It's hard to know how many of them it actually prevents. But in order to stop it in the moment, you genuinely would need to have somebody watching each camera all the time. So I do think it does provide a preventative measure, because people are many times less likely to engage in that behavior if they know there's a camera system present. So, but I don't have any data about how much we've been able to prevent, but we're more successful in catching the perpetrators many times.
Okay. Now, are there other concerns about privacy and things which prevents us from putting cameras up uh, more broadly at our campuses?
I mean, not that I'm aware of. I mean, the cameras would basically provide uh, security for the perimeter of the district, and what our focus of the cameras would be on prevention. It wouldn't be focused on staff, or it's never focused on staff or students, or it's focused in places where our sites are vulnerable, where it's most vulnerable, where perpetrators are entering campus. So those are the areas of focus, not on the interior or staff or students or anything like that.
This sounds good. Yeah, and as we talk about, I'm kind of digressing from this meeting's agenda, but as we talk about this fencing, 15.5, so that will, once we get forward with our fencing plans, then the access will become much more controlled, let's say, right? And the amount of monitoring we would have to do would be much less. So we should consider putting some of this as part of fencing, as part of that one bigger project.
Kelly, you want to respond to that?
Well, I just want to make sure I understand, was that a question or just a statement?
I was just
Um,
yeah,
oh,
but
okay.
if you think if that cannot be done, then let me. Then
Oh
we
yeah,
can-
we need to be we need to finish in 6 minutes. But I have a quick question for Kelly. Kelly, I see this fence project, and do we plan to do all this enclosed fence? It's basically
all of, so all of the, if you all review the maps that were given to you,
Mhm.
all of the fencing is identified based on the space that it's going to be connected to. So there's the existing fencing that we currently have, and then there's going to be interior perimeter fencing. And what that is, it's part of our strategy to enclose the core of our campuses so that they're not accessible and open to the public. And one, that is part of the anti-vandalism strategy, but it also limits the ability for people to get to the interior of the campus after hours, because that's where our damage is occurring, because that's where we can't see from the street. So once that is installed, we should see much greater control, but also we also want to protect our investment of new construction. So it will also limit the ability for people to get in and damage, our play fields or our open spaces that are used for outdoor learning. So it's just a different strategy, and it will allow us to have continued accessibility of the public space, but close off the interiors of the campuses so that we don't have people meandering and going through the buildings on the weekends.
On the weekends. But right now that I see people can be free to access let's see, my nearby schools like Warm Spring and Leach. They're open.
Mhm.
There's no gate.
Well, that is part of as Associate Superintendent Battle stated, we are working on a strategic plan that we will bring forward to you all at a later time that will identify some areas that we are vulnerable.
Okay.
And we want to address those areas first, and then
Yes, that
eventually
makes
roll out district-wide,
Mhm.
that same strategy.
Yeah, I like that approach. Okay, I guess that's sure. Yeah, anyone else have questions?
I think
Comments?
not from my side.
Right.
So
We thank you, trustees, and we'll see you all on Wednesday night.
thank you so much.
Yeah,
I guess
exciting
I want to
night.
say we conducted the meeting well within time, right?
Yes.
You
Thank you
guys did a
guys
great
so
job.
You guys did great.
Thank you and happy Monday.